Hi and welcome to Fantasy Footy Fan, Jeff here. So hopefully you all had a good week. We had, as usual, some ups and downs. We've got some underpriced premiums to look at. We had some rookies also jump out of nowhere. So really interesting round. Great Anzac round. Obviously we had bumper crowds. So it was a great round of footy and a fairly decent round of fantasy as well. So as you can see, I scored a 2078, which ranked me just over 10k for the round, and my overall ranking went up by 2k, so I'm now ranked 7190 overall. So I'm pretty happy with that. Obviously, hopefully could have scored better, and we'll go through my team soon and a few other bits and pieces of information. But having a look at my team for the week, starting in defense, I was pretty happy with that. Sheasel did his usual thing. Dakes had that handball taken away from him, so he got 98 instead of 100. That would have looked a lot nicer having that ton up there, but he didn't get that. Hayden Young, 100, so happy with that. Elliot Yeo, an 82. Considering the way he played, it just felt like it was more of a ton game than an 82 game. Matt Roberts, as usual, man, what a pick he is. So he scored an 82. Just so happy. He continues to make money. And we're going to be able to downgrade him for a ton of cash, which is great. Same with Sam Closey as well. So he scored a 59, and I mean, 59's okay. I mean, he's scored better in the past, but what are you going to do? He's going to have these scores from time to time, but definitely still worth the pick. Obviously, Jack Steele. Now, the thing with Jack Steele, the moment you see Jack Steele come out with his legs strapped, generally, there's a concern. But as we know with some of these players, we want to have a look at how they tackle and their contested possession. So we'll go through Jack Steele's stats a little bit later. Tom Green came out with a 127. Pretty happy with that. Expecting more from Butters, a 98. Nick Martin is doing his thing still, playing at halfback role, a 113. I brought in Sam Walsh this week, a 102. Guess I'm pretty happy with that, but I'm hoping he can get up to that 110, 115 kind of average. Jeremy Sharp was a big disappointment. I reckon we're hoping that he was going to do better this week because I'm planning to trade him out. But yeah, that just really impacted his score. We'll go through him a little bit later. So I ended up taking a Darcy Wilson score of 92. I brought on Harley Reid, who was managed this week, to get Darcy Wilson's score, but who would have thought that Colby McKercher would have scored a 109? We'll go through him in a bit of detail as well a little bit later in the video. And Will Graham, an 83, really happy with that. Didn't expect him to score an 83, to be honest, but just great for the cash generation. Excuse me. But started the round in great fashion with getting Gawn's 134, which actually ended up being the best score for my team. So to get him as captain was just a perfect start. Rowan Marshall, a 73. I'll talk about him as well and what I'm going to do. But so disappointed. But again, like I said, we'll talk about him a bit later. A 90 from Heaney. Again, the way he played, was hoping for a ton at least. Flanders as usual. So Luke Jackson and Tom Powell are the big problems. I mean, what do we do in our forward line? Even Zorko scored badly this week. So, we just don't have anyone really in our forward line. But then you get someone like a Nat Fyfe who just pulls out a 118. And that just, not only is it a fantastic score, but now it drops his break even. He gets more cash generation. It's just perfect. So glad that I have kept him. And then Dempsey, probably time to go now, even though he started the game on fire. But pretty happy with Harvey Thomas. Again, a game I didn't expect him to get a 77, but The thing is that with players that have a high ceiling, you really should. Well, I try to back those players in. If they've got a high ceiling, but maybe some lower scores around that, you just never know when they'll pull out a decent score again. And in the end, Harvey Thomas did that. I had the emergency on 37 trying to loop Seth Campbell, but I was better off obviously looping Thomas. And then a Harvey Gallagher 32. So some of these rookies are starting to really need to be moved on. So as far as my trades went for the week, what I decided to do, even though Zach Williams was going to play, I thought, look, I really want to be doing downgrade upgrades now. I want to get to full premium as quick as I can. And I thought Zach Williams, he's maxed out now, so I thought I would still trade him out. D'Ambrosio had to go, aside from having like a 98 break even or something, he wasn't playing anyway. So I thought he definitely has to go. But for me to be able to get Sam Walsh in, who I wanted to get in, there are some other premiums I wanted to get in, but I just wanted to wait till they bottomed out before I brought him in. But Sam Walsh was in a good place for me to bring him in, and to do that, I didn't have the money to go to Garcia because a lot went to Hugo Garcia. So I only had, I think, 239k free, and Riley Hardiman was 234. So I was thinking of going Tajwa Woden, which also would have been a good pick, but I thought let's just take a gamble on Hardiman. His VFL scores weren't fantastic, but there was some big raps on him, and he was lining up at halfback. So I thought, I'll just try him instead, and it kind of worked. He scored a 54. So I'm, fairly happy with that. Hopefully he keeps his spot in the team. But that was a gamble to get in Sam Walsh, and hopefully it pays off. So as I mentioned, I picked Gawn as captain or vice captain, loopholed him, got his score. Really happy with that. So as far as some sort of news, suspensions, and injuries and so forth. Just looking through, obviously it's best to wait till tomorrow when the injury list comes out, but just some of the things that caught my eye. So, we've got Chera is coming back this week, he's likely coming back this week. So how does that impact Sam Walsh? That'll be the question. So I'm hoping it complements Sam Walsh, but that's just another mouth to feed in the midfield. He'll likely take over, someone else's spot in the midfield because Carlton will run Walsh, Cripps, and Chera through the midfield. But, hopefully that actually helps Sam Walsh's score. We've also got Tom Stewart back this week. So for those of us, so that's great news, obviously, for those who kept Stewart. But for those of us who don't have Stewart, then it's a great opportunity not to bring him in this week because he's got a break even of 141. But we'll wait till he bottoms out, and then we could actually end up picking him up for, in the 700s, potentially, 750, 770, something like that. He started really well, but 85, 114, 110, and then 83 and 80, and then now that 47. So, we could get him on the cheap. He could end up being nearly a straight swap from Roberts to Stewart, the way Roberts is scoring. So, just something to think about. So we got Stewart coming back this week from concussion. Now, Rosie did a little low-grade hamstring, so we'll find out probably today or tomorrow how many weeks he's going to miss. It's a low grade, so they're thinking maybe 1 to 2 weeks, I think. is what he'll likely miss. So you've got the option, obviously, of keeping him. But I think, having 2 trades a week, I think definitely, you'd be wanting to upgrade Rosie to, an underpriced premium. We'll go through some of those premiums in a moment as well. So as I mentioned as well, Jack Steele, he got a 72, came in with the leg strapped. So that wasn't ideal, and didn't, again, there's 2 weeks in a row now for Steele. That's an 87 and a 72 for him. So that's not great at all. So he's got his break even is now 151. So for those who don't own him, you're waiting till he bottoms out to bring him in. But look, he still had 9 tackles and he still had 10 contested possessions. So he's still sort of, going in and getting the ball, but he had no marks, not even 1 mark. Now, could that be because of the leg injury? Maybe he's not covering the ground as well as he could to be able to pick up some of those marks. It could be. Who knows? But for owners, for non-owners anyway, wait till he bottoms out. For owners like myself, we'll have another look again this week. When the Saints play North. I mean, this is the prime game for him to test him out. If he doesn't score well against North this week, something is absolutely wrong. So let's see how he goes this week. He should ton up. But if he gets another 70, 80, if he gets anything under 90, that's a concern. And we'll have to reassess then. So we've also got Luke Parker, who is due back this week. He was a test last week, and obviously they held him. So I'd say he'd be coming back this week. So now the question is, how does he impact Isaac Heaney? Is he going to go straight into the midfield? Is he going to play a little bit more forward? We're just going to have to wait and see how Parker's inclusion impacts Isaac Heaney. Harley Reid, as we know, was managed, so he is definitely back this week. Obviously for us as owners, there's plenty of us, 80% of us, will be happy to bring him back onto our field. Scores of 80, 78, 81 and 80 in his last 3 matches, and with a break even of 22, we'll be able to bring him on for any underperforming rookie we may have, and to continue to make cash off him. So with the Western Bulldogs, Libba was a laid out. So for those of you that had Libba and didn't get a chance to correct that out, that's obviously disappointing. It's just typical Bevo doing Bevo things as well. He's driving us mad with the way that he is managing his team. But Libba, you'd expect, would be back this week. And then, of course, as we know, Sanders was also omitted. He ended up smashing it in the VFL. And you'd expect that Sanders would come back this week. But after subbing him the previous game, or having him starting him as the sub, and now being out, you would think Sanders will come back. So if you've held Sanders, then hopefully he comes back this week and has a pretty good game, as expected, as you think he would. If he can just play purely on the ground, best 22, Sanders is going to score. But of course, it all depends on what Bevo decides to do. So that's sort of some of the suspension injury news. There's probably some that I might have missed, so I'll have a look through, and as we should all do, have a look through the injury report tomorrow. But what we'll do is we'll go through some of the games now, and have a look at some of the CBAs as well, just see for any of the fantasy relevant players and see who we could potentially bring in, trade out, and so forth. So having a look at the first game, which was Richmond and Melbourne, and just having a look through the CBAs there. So it's really interesting. Obviously with Richmond, there's no one really to consider. A lot of the main mids that we may consider, or players we might consider, like a Short or a Taranto, even a Hopper, I mean, they're all injured. So there's really no one of interest there. Although Thomas Dow had a pretty decent game, but only 38% CBAs. But anyway, we won't bother with Richmond, but with Melbourne. So usual suspects there. So obviously Oliver and Viney. Oliver had 81% CBAs, but Petrarca only 57% CBAs, and so he's going to become a concern for his owners. It's a couple of games now where he hasn't done well for non-owners. I mean, let's just see how low he can go. But obviously we want to see a bit of form from him. And more time in the midfield. We'd rather be seeing, Petrarca spending more time in the midfield than Viney. But the midfield was, Sparrow was brought in, Pickett was brought in. So similar to, I guess, what Adelaide are doing. I think Melbourne are trying to bring in some pace into their midfield. And that, of course, naturally will impact some of their other midfielders. But looking through that game, so... For Richmond, there's probably no one really of interest. I think I don't know what am I looking? Oh yeah, sorry. If anyone brought in Lafau, but he's a -1 break even, averaging 47. But yeah. Anyway, not many people own him. So really, there's no one there. I think probably the only main one, and I guess for me as well, is Seth Campbell. So Seth Campbell, I might just go to my team now. Yeah, so Seth Campbell, so he scored, a 37, 69% game time. So playing his kind of usual role, rotating up forward. And so, he only went up 4K, break even of 52. I mean, you could definitely trade him out now. He's not going to really make any more cash. If you've got other things to worry about, then yeah, sure, you could probably just still hold him. He's not going to really make or lose a lot of cash, I don't think. Not in the next couple of weeks anyway. I'll just be probably just leaving him there while I sort out some other things in my team. But yeah, moving over to Melbourne. So obviously Gawn, a 134. Nothing really much to say there, just typical Gawn stuff. Again, as I've said before with your rucks, you've got Gawn and English. Marshall we'll talk about in a moment, but then you've got Sherry as well, and Grundy, who didn't do well this week. But Gawn obviously is the one we all must have if we can get him in our teams. If we don't have him, we really need to. And it looks like at this stage, initially it was Marshall, but now it's probably English. It's going to be that Gawn-English combination. They're the top two rucks in the comp, in my opinion. And then sort of going on down, so Petrarca, so yeah, it wasn't great, and that's just because, he was tagged a little bit as well. Marley and Pickett sort of tagged him, and as a result, he got that 74. And as a result as well, Petrarca was moved into the forward line a little bit too. So that actually means good things for non-owners. So he's down now to 847. Is what his price is at. He's got a break-even of 137. He went down 42k this week. That's 110k overall. And, he likely will go down again this week. So it's just because of these last two scores, 64 and a 74. But before that, he's scored 87, 121, 109, 83, 112. That's pretty decent. The 80s are not great, but he's turned up 3 times there. But the last couple of rounds just hasn't really worked for him. So let's just wait and see with Petrarca. Wait till he bottoms out, and you'd expect him to hopefully perform well this week. I'm just having a quick look. Where are we? So Melbourne has got the Cats at the G. So the concern there would be Connor. So Connor from Geelong has been tagging in the last few weeks. Oliver's not really playing all that well. It is highly likely Petrarca will get tagged again. That's what I'm expecting. We'll see what happens. But that's what, I would predict. And if that's the case, then for owners, that's a concern, a huge concern. But for non-owners, that really helps us because we could end up getting Petrarca for like under 800k. Imagine that. So anyway, just something to have a think about. We'll keep a close eye on that game, see if Connor does actually tag Petrarca. Woe Woden ended up getting a 69. He was the other one I was considering bringing in. He's still only 250. But yeah, it's just, look at his scores like 12, 21, 7, 41, and now a 71. And obviously some of Woe Woden's scores included subs and so forth. But at 250, he started in the best 22. He rotated a little bit through the midfield, which was not too bad. No like really significant CBAs or anything, but he was playing around in and out of there. You got to be pretty happy with that with a 69. Hopefully he can keep that up, and that was only in 70% game time, so that's really good. Caleb Windsor was subbed out on a 67. So it is probably time for all of his owners. So he's got just 28% ownership. He's a break even of 39. So look, he went up 15k and made 134k overall. Not too bad. Bit of a slow burn, but break even of 39. So if you've got other things to worry about them. You can just keep Windsor. We just have to hope though that he's. He might start as a sub, get subbed, not even start at all, get a break. That's the potential with Windsor. It's the only thing to keep an eye on. So Oliver, I don't know if you read the article last week. He had the thumb surgery and he felt great and he trained with the best he's ever trained. That was, I think, what Simon Goodwin might have said that. So I was really keen to see how Oliver would go in this game. And he started well. He started actually well. He looked good, but I think it looked like he was kind of lacking a bit of match fitness still. I don't know how that's possible after 7 games of footy or 8 games of footy or so. But anyway, he only scored a 65. So he had 22 possessions, but 13 of those were handballs. He had 2 frees against him as well, which didn't help. And in the 76% game time. So, we're still keeping an eye on Oliver because you don't just magically lose the talent that Oliver has. Obviously, he hasn't had a proper preseason. He's probably still building up a bit of that match fitness. He's lost 286k overall now. He's down to 741k, lost another 63k this week. And his break even is 137. So we're waiting till he really bottoms out. But then beyond that, we're waiting to see a ton. And also just waiting to see how he's playing. We want to see some good form before we think about bringing him in. So if he is really feeling good and feeling great and so forth, then that's going to reflect in the scores. So again, another week of just keeping an eye on Oliver. So we'll move on to the Essendon and Collingwood game, which was an awesome game to watch. Ended up in a draw, but Zach Merritt continued to do Zach Merritt things. 125 for him, and you'd expect that in an Anzac Day game. So he actually dropped 6k, but his break even's 127. He's just over $1 million. There is some better value premium picks to get, but he's like premium top 4 type premium mid or premium player in the comp. So if you want to spend up and get that really uber premium, then go for it because Merritt's having an awesome season. So Nick Martin scored a 113, continuing to play that role off halfback. 30 possessions for him, which included a goal, which is great. So he's now worth $9.21. That's premium price. He's averaging 109 pretty much. That's premium average. So he needs to be considered a premium now. Started off as a bit of a high-end mid-pricer, but is definitely a premium in our back line and is going to finish at this stage, by the looks of it, as a top 6 defender. So really happy to have him in my team, and eventually, I've got him in my midfield still, but I think eventually I'll move him into my defence at some point. Maybe I'll upgrade a Roberts or a Closey, bring Martin into defence, and then get a nice uber mid into my team at some point. So Darcy Parish did his usual Anzac Day performance, and he scored a 107, 25 possessions, and that had 18 kicks, kicked a goal as well. So that's pretty good, actually, considering he only played 68% game time. But again, with Parish, I want to see him perform in a non-Anzac Day game. Let's see how he goes next week, because so far he hasn't been great. Started well, but that 107, let's just see if he can ton up again. So as I mentioned, break even of 106, he'll only go up another few K if he gets a 110, 115 or something like that this week. So if he gets another ton, then maybe he's worth considering at just over 800K. Definitely would be an underpriced premium. And then sort of moving on through that, Jai Caldwell was a popular pick, I think, this week because of the role. Looking at the CBAs for this game, so it was mainly, surprisingly, Stringer 75% and Durham 60%, Parish 60%. Caldwell only 25%, but was still sort of rotating through the midfield, but just didn't perform. Only scored a 71, and that's pretty much because he still had 24 possessions, which is great, but 16 of those were handballs. That's pretty much what hurt him and hurt his score. But I think he's still a good pick. Not maybe are you going to bring him in? Look, that's not really my strategy. I don't really want to bring in a player that is not going to be a keeper and a premium. I really, with my strategy anyway, unless there's tremendous value, then I'm really more about trying to downgrade and upgrade to premiums or underpriced premiums is what I'm trying to do. But Caldwell's still good value. I mean, if it's all you can afford, he's only 778K, but I think there's some other players near that price that I think might be worth going to as we continue looking through some of these other players, especially if you've got like a Petrarca dropping in value as well, the way he is. But he's gone up 100K now, Caldwell. I went up 21K this week. And just in his last few games, this is where it's at. He's averaging, from round 4, a 103, a 108, and a 117. A 71 this week, but I wouldn't really, if you own him, I wouldn't be too worried about that. It's just that he did handball a little bit more than he should have, but he's still got plenty of the ball. He's still got the role, so I'd be holding. And if you can only afford someone like that in your forward line, because we are struggling in our forward lines. I mean, look, I've got Jackson and Powell, and they're just hopeless at the moment. That's a bit harsh on Powell. We'll get to Powell in a moment, but Jackson's been terrible last few games. Moving on with the Bombers, and that's probably about it. But with Collingwood, I guess the only relevant player there is Nick Dacos. Excuse me. So he scored a 98. So the thing with Dakes, he's not performing the way we had expected, and that's probably reflective of the way Collingwood is playing at the moment. These are like rookie kind of scores for Nick Dacos. 95, 95, 98 in his last 3 games. Like, he should be getting 110, 120. And he's just not doing that at the moment. So we're hoping that his form will improve. But again, for those who don't own him, because like 50% do not own him, he's lost 111K overall and lost 15K this week. His break-even is a 111. Now, I think last week I said that, he was primed to bring in, but I think definitely this week, but you could even wait another week. Like, I think Collingwood, where are we? So Collingwood has got Carlton this week. So as I have said probably the last few weeks, is Carlton do a great job at stopping the primary ball mover of their opposition, and in this case, it's Dacos or Degoe. So they'll put their attention, likely I think maybe on Dacos if he's in the midfield, but if he's at half back, then it might be a bit different. But you think Dakes would step up against Carlton, but we'll see. But I think if you don't own Dakes, you could definitely wait another week before bringing him in. So I think with the Collingwood game, there's not really any other players of interest. Degoe keeps dropping in price, but you're not really touching that. And yeah, I mean, not one player turned up for Collingwood. That's just shows where they are at the moment. They're not really hitting their stride. But having said that, they didn't really have many players turn up last year either. Dacos was probably the main one there. But anyway, moving on to GWS and Brisbane. So Tom Green came back with a 127. So he's down to 942 now because he had those scores of 88 and 72, but now 100, now 127. And I think his break-even's 121. So if you're keen to bring him in, you might wait another week. He might drop a little bit more in price. But yeah, he's averaging 109 and he is a premium mid. Probably a player we're going to need to get in at some point if we don't own him. But yeah, the fact he's dropped 56k overall now and 13k this week is really good for non-owners. But if you own him, you're pretty happy with that 127. So Josh Kelly, I don't know how many own him, but Kelly, that's another 121 from him, and he looks like he's in some pretty decent form of late. So a 119 and a 121 in his last 2 weeks. Only owned by 1%. So if you want a pod, I think he is a pretty good pod. So he's only 897, break even of 94, which you think he would get, and he's averaging 104. So there is still some good value out there for premium mids, and he's definitely an option if you want a pod. I'd say definitely consider him. Finn Callahan, I'm only mentioning him because he's a player not for this year, but definitely to consider next year. He looked really good in this game. Obviously, he's not really owned by anyone, but he scored a 108. And I think for next year, we keep an eye on him. He's going to be hopefully a good mid-pricer that we could start with because he's definitely playing in the midfield. If we have a look at the CBAs for GWS, he only had 27% CBAs, but he was actually rotating through the midfield quite a bit. It was mainly Green, Kelly, in the midfield there, and then it was kind of spread out a little bit, I guess because Cornelio's not in the team, but I think Cornelio's back in a week or two. Then Lockie Whitfield at 105, and that was a good score from him. He had 22 kicks of his 31 possessions and 7 marks, which obviously helped him get to his 105. And is he worth, for owners, pretty happy with his consistent performance, but he is an uber premium defender, averaging 109. He's 931k, and he's maintaining his average. He's gone up 76k for the season. I think he's another one of those players where at the end of the year, he's one that will need to be in our teams because he will end up being a top 6 defender. And then for the rest of the team there, Harvey Thomas, really happy with his 77. So now that's really helped his score by getting that. It was looking like he was going to max out, but by getting that 77, he's gone up 42k. His break even's 24. He's gone up 223k overall, which is exactly what we want. And now we can hold him just for a couple of more weeks, make a little bit more cash off him, and then downgrade him in a week or two, which is what I'll be looking at. So Darcy Jones came in for Toby Green, who was suspended, and he had a really good game. I think the Giants were gifting Darcy Jones a few possessions and goals and this and that. But yeah, if you brought him in, then you're happy with that 70. -6 break even, went up 34k. Now the only thing is Toby Green comes back in after suspension, and that could very well mean that Darcy Jones loses his spot in the team, or at the very least starts as the sub. But we'll see what the Giants do. They may bring in Green and keep Darcy Jones, because he actually looked pretty good. He looked really good in that forward line. So, but you're happy with a 70. 15 possessions, 2 goals. I mean, that's great for a 200k rookie. And then moving on, so Cadman, so for those of you who have Cadman, he only scored a 33. And I would say that, he's made 200k, and that's awesome for his owners. And I reckon it's probably time, if not this week, then next week. He made 3k, but his break-even's 53. Is he really going to be able to get to that 53? He's had a few scores above 53 before, so if it's urgent, not urgent, then you could hold him for another week if you've got some other things to sort out. But yeah, look, he could definitely go now. I think if you got nothing else to do and you need a downgrade, you could downgrade Cadman. But moving over to the Lions, and Dunkley scored a ton. He evened up there, and he's at that uber premium level as well, averaging 108, break even of 126. And his price hasn't really moved all that much for the year. He's been fairly consistent, turned up in every game except last round where he scored a 90. But yeah, again, I'd be looking at more underpriced premiums if you don't own him. Dane Zorko was a pretty big disappointment, and that's predominantly because he didn't play all his time in the back line. It was really split across the forward, mid, and backs, and as a result, he got a 62. So hopefully for his owners this week, he can go back to playing purely at halfback. But he only ended up with 14 possessions in the end. And yeah, nothing of real significance there. So only a 62. But yeah, hopefully Fagan puts him back into defense this week. Obviously, if you own him, you're still holding. But if you don't own him, he's now under 900k. He's 899k. He lost 9k this week, break even of 119. If you want to bring in a forward, then he's probably a good forward to bring in. I can't see him playing the same role again that he played this week. I would think, especially after based on the fact that Lions got smashed, I would think that he would probably go back to playing halfback. But time will tell. I probably won't be bringing him in this week, but I will be looking at him the following week because I do need to strengthen my forward lineup. Lachie Neale is 62. I'm not going to bother really with Lachie Neale. Kyle Lohmann at 54. Yeah, there's no one really else. James Tunstall, I think, got a 16. He started as a sub, I think. So yeah, no one really of interest for me here. For the Port and St Kilda game, so there's some relevance there. So for those of you who kept Ollie Wines, he really came through with a 113, 5% owned. So yeah, obviously you're holding from that, but his scores are just going to be inconsistent. It's just the way it's going to be with him, I think. Look at his last few scores: 106, 61, and then a 113. If you're happy to ride that roller coaster with him, then yeah, you can hold on to him. But I think if you own him, break even at 76. So I'd say you're definitely holding. But at some point, you're going to need to upgrade him to an uber premium. So Jace Burgoyne continues to hold his role at halfback. That's a 90 and a 112 in his last 2 weeks. So that's great for him. Zach Butters, a 98. So again, for owners like myself, obviously you're just still holding. But for non-owners, he's now 919k. He's only gone up, even though he's averaging 105 and put out some big scores, he's only gone up 25k overall. So if you're looking to bring in an Uber Premium, look, he's definitely one to bring in. It'll be interesting to see how he goes without Rosie in the team for the next couple of weeks. Actually, for Wines owners, that'll probably really help out Wines. And if you've got Horn Francis as well, it'll help out owning those without Rosie in the team. But I think Butters definitely is worth looking at bringing in at just only 919k. I mean, I brought in Walsh last week. He was 911k. Yeah, definitely Butters is worth bringing in at that price if you don't own him. So Houston, another decent score from him, a 97. So he is now averaging 92, a 109, and 119, and a 97 in his last few games. So so he's doing okay, probably not one I'm looking at bringing into my defense at this stage. Jordan Sweet. So what do we do here? So I think there's going to be a fair few jumping on. There might have even been a few that jumped on last week because, of course, his first game, he scored a 60, but that was with Soldo. But now that Soldo's out of the team and he's going to be out for, I think I heard like five weeks. So he scored a 96 rucking solo. So I think he's one that if you are, because I think, I can't remember what Sherry's price was, and a lot of us started Sherry, I can't remember exactly what his starting price was. I think it was around the 600 mark or something like that, and we jumped on him thinking that he'd be good value. But Sweet at 443, he has to be a consideration for sure for our benches because he's made 56k overall. He made 45k this week, break even of 12. You'd say that he'd probably average around the 90 mark, I think, for the next 5 weeks or so. He got 96 this round. And that was rucking against, he was rucking against a bit of an injured Marshall, but even so, I actually watched this game and he rucked really well. He had 11 possessions, 7 of which were handballs. He had 6 tackles. That's a great sign. And 36 hit outs. So that's where all of his points were. You'd expect that he would continue to perform similarly to that. So about a 90 average from here. And if he gets a 90 average from here over the next 5-6 weeks, then he's going to earn us the cash that we need and be a good ruck bench option as well. In case, our rucks that we have on the ground are injured. I guess another option that I have to say I'm honestly considering, that's Marshall has had, and we'll get to the Saints just in a sec, but I'll talk about Marshall now. So the last 2 games, a 62 and a 73, coming off games of 117, 136, 138. I brought him in at the 62, and that just sucks. So, that's how it is sometimes. I spent up over $1 million to bring him in. He was in great form. I thought like in the buys, I could use Jackson on my field as well in the forward line, and that could bring another rookie in, and I could score well. I did end up scoring well in that last buy round, so that strategy didn't work. But now Marshall's at 960k. Is there an option where maybe I trade Marshall down to Sweet and I run Sweet as my R2 for the next 5 weeks at an average of about 90, I think is what he will average. And I guess I will take that. On occasion, he might even ton up. But then that gives me 500k to upgrade. Now, likely, I'll talk about my trades in a moment, but if I do that trade, I will probably upgrade Sharp to, because Sharp is now break even of 76. He's 570k. How much did he go down So he dropped 3K, so that's not too bad. Even though he scored that horrible 39, he only dropped 3K. So made 286K. So maybe he's primed now, and I might look to maybe upgrade him, and I might actually upgrade him to Bont. Because even though Bronze is not actually averaging what he is expected to average, he's got games coming up against Hawthorn and Richmond. So I think that I want to jump onto Bont now and have him in my team. I think he'll score quite well against those teams. So I'll get onto Bont in a moment too with his price and so forth. But getting back to Marshall, I think that is an option. A Marshall to sweet trade and then use that cash to upgrade, and then you'll actually have probably a little bit of cash left over as well, which you could use for an upgrade next week. So that I don't normally like sideways trading that much, but I think it could be a worthwhile strategy to go with. So I will be seriously thinking about that. Connor Rozee owners, so scored an 89. And that's just unfortunate because he was lined up to ton up. He had, I think he had gotten to that 89 by sort of towards the back end of the third quarter. And then, of course, it looked like he had kind of hyperextended his leg, but I think it ended up obviously tweaking his hamstring. So he's got a low-grade hamstring, so he's out for a couple of weeks. So yeah, I guess I'd be trading him if he's out for a couple of weeks. But he's so it's not his fault. I mean, he got injured, so what are you going to do? But he still scored an 89. It's not too bad. And he dropped 34K this week. And when he comes back, his break even will be 138. So we'll be looking at trying to get him on the cheap as well when he bottoms out. I keep forgetting if I checked these players the week before, but okay, so Horn Francis, 7% owned, so he scored a 79. Now, if you own him, you'd certainly be keeping him. With Rozee out for the next couple of weeks, you'd expect that Horn Francis will have a bigger piece of the pie in the midfield. If we have a look at the CBAs for this game, Butters had 80%. And then it was split after that. Drew had 57, Horn Francis had 57, Rozee had 57, and Wines had 46% CBAs. So it was really spread. But I would think Horn Francis will probably get a few more CBAs with Rozee out of the team. So I would be holding onto him, but I wouldn't be bringing him in. I think I was big on Horn Francis at the start of the year. But more so for Supercoach rather than fantasy. And the end is what I thought he would be better at. And yeah, the last few games, 76, 85, 79. So yeah, you wouldn't be bringing him in. But if you held him or own him, I would be holding. So let's see. With Port... there's no one really else of consideration there with the Saints. So it was good to see Sinclair with a 108. He had 28 possessions, 20 were kicks, and he kicked a goal. So it was good to actually see him get back on the scorers list. He's sort of been up and down, and we're going to be saying this all year with Wangani, Malira, Sinclair, Bonner. Their scores are going to be up and down because there's only so much ball there is down back. But he's a break-even of 105 now, just over 800K. So I'd like to see another good game from him, but I still think it's high risk with him. Wangani Malira scored well, though. It's 96. So he is averaging 93. Started the season well, but yeah, I wouldn't be considering bringing him in. I guess if you own him though, you're probably holding. Break even of 110. Yeah, I guess you're holding for now, unless you're planning to upgrade. Really happy with Darcy Wilson. He had a great game. So 21 possessions, 15 were kicks, 6 marks as well. Could have kicked a couple of snags, but only scored 2 behinds. And did his owners proud. So he scored that 92. He went up 48k, and now that's 256k he's owned, and that's what you want from a rookie. If you can get a rookie making 256k, then he's done his job, and his break even's 22. So I'm really wrapped with that, and I'll be able to downgrade him or upgrade him in a couple of weeks' time. So Bonner scored an 80, and I think that's roughly where Bonner's going to sit. So he has gone up 263k, again, done his job there. He went up 9k this round, break even of 89. I think I said even last week that he's probably due now for an upgrade, especially now that there's some underpriced premiums. So I think, time to probably upgrade him. Again, if you've got other urgent matters, then you're taking care of those, because Bonner you can just hold on to, because he's roughly going to get around that 80 average. He might turn up every now and then, but so you got obviously options there. So Rowan Marshall, as I mentioned before, so he didn't start the game very well. I was watching this game and watching him closely, and then he got that knock on the knee. And then from then on, you just saw him limping a bit. You saw him trying, but he dropped a few marks, and he just didn't really get into the game. And he only ended up with 11 possessions and had the 4 marks and the 31 hitouts. So what do we do this week? I mean, is he rested? Do they bring in a Tom Campbell or a Jack Hayes to support him? We're going to have to see when the teams are announced on Thursday. But I'm just undecided about what to do with him. So they play. Look, I mean, they play North. He's rucking against Sherry. So Sherry is a decent ruckman. But we'll just see who gets named, and if he gets named, and because I'm definitely considering that Marshall to Sweet trade potentially. So I've already spoken about Jack Steele. That's 72. Let's wait another week on him for owners to see how he goes against North, and for non-owners, you're definitely waiting until he bottoms out to bring in. Winhager is 66, so he's just going to be up and down. When we have a look at these CBAs, so Winhager, that's 80% CBAs. So you're really happy with that as an owner, but he's just not putting out. Like, that's 21 possessions, but 13 were handballs, and that's what probably hurt his score a little bit. And he had 2 free kicks against as well. So for owners there, but you're not considering bringing him in. And for owners, actually, let's just see how many own him. He's only owned by 2%. So let's keep moving on here. And so Hugo Garcia, many brought Hugo Garcia in this week, seeing that he was actually getting plenty of time in the midfield, and that was still the case. He had 50% CBAs, so he did spend time in the middle, but just didn't perform. That's pretty much what it was. And scored a 41. He had 7 possessions, but 5 were handballs. But the good thing that we saw with him is his tackling. He had 6 tackles, and that's what really helped his score to a 41. But, obviously if you own him, you're there to make money off him. He's got a break even of 5. Hopefully he'll hold his spot. I mean, he's already made 112k, made 41k this round, and he'll continue to make more cash as long as he keeps playing and keeps getting some CBAs. So moving to North Melbourne and Adelaide. So as I mentioned with Sheasel, a 125. If you don't own him, you've got to get him in your team at some point. I don't know when and how. It doesn't look like he's going to be dropping anytime soon. Like he's already gone up 186k. He's well over $1 million. He's averaging 125. What an uber duper premium. Obviously for owners, really happy with that. But there's still a good 34 33, 34% that don't own him. You got to work out a way to get him in at some point. Colby McKercher was the big surprise. It was awesome to see. McKercher was back at his halfback role. He had 12 kick-ins as well. It's a beautiful thing to see. Hopefully Clarkson keeps playing him like this. And this is why I didn't trade him out. Because he had the job security. He had that one game, and it's only because he got injured, I think, in that game. But he wasn't going to get dropped. And the moment that he was named the following week, I thought to myself, I'm not going to trade him out. I know many probably would. But I knew that he'd have the job security, that he would hopefully get back into that role, and he did. He had 32 possessions, 23 kicks, 7 marks. So really happy with that. The only problem, of course, is that I didn't have him on my field. So I chose, just because of his form in recent times, I thought, well, Closey, Graham, and then when Wilson, scored that 88 or 92, whatever it was, I thought, yeah, that's great. But, at the end of the day, I may not have had McKercher score, and that would have really helped if I had him on field. But I'm just really happy that he had that score, because his price bumped up by 29k. His break even is 34 again, or 34, and he's made 191k overall, and he is back again as a cash cow. So let's hope he still continues that role, continues to make cash, and then eventually we can upgrade or downgrade him at a really good price. So LDU scored a 98. I think LDU is pretty much officially a Supercoach player. Even in Supercoach, he's not necessarily scoring as well, but he's now down to 813. So he scored a 98, and it looks like that's kind of where he's gonna live, that 90 to 100 average. We were all hoping that maybe he would get to that 105, 110 this year, but it just doesn't look like it. When we have a look at his stats, so he had 29 possessions, but 17 were handballs. So we were hoping he was going to kick more. 4 tackles, would like to see that up a little bit, but 4 tackles is all right. And he kicked a goal too. So it's a pretty decent game overall, but you just got to expect with LDU from now on that he's going to average probably anywhere between 90 to 100. He'll ton up on the occasion, maybe just over a ton, but then get those 90 scores, and I think that's just where it's at. So I wouldn't be looking at trading him in, no matter how cheap he goes. I'd be spending my money elsewhere until we see if he has a rich vein of form and he's tonning up, after like 2 weeks, 3 weeks in a row, then maybe there's a consideration there. So Sherry only put up an 83, and he only had 15 possessions, 32 hitouts. But again, if you've got Sherry, then you're still pretty happy with that. He's 845k. He's averaging 103. So that's pretty good. You probably would have initially started him to make cash off him and upgrade him, but if you've got other things on your in your team to sort out, that's where you're looking. He'd be the last person you'd look at to upgrade to another rookie, to a premium. So he continues to score well, and he'll have those games every now and then, but he'll also ton up as well regularly too. So Biggie Newen scored a 65. I think there is some that brought him in. He's owned by 10%, so there would be a few that brought him in. He's got a -1 break even, so he'll probably average around that 65 mark, and if he does, he's going to make you cash. So he's gone up now, 144k overall. So if you own him, you're holding and hoping that he will continue to make cash, because he's got the job security as well. And then, so I brought in this week Hardiman. I'm really hoping that he continues to score decently and has the job security. Went up 19k this week. He's 253k now. Got a break even of 10. So I'm just hoping that he holds his spot. So Comben has been a bit of a flop. I know some have probably jumped on him. He's made 140k though, which is decent if you jumped on to him before he played his first game. He made 12k this round, break even of 54. Again, if you own him, I would say you're probably moving him on now. But if you've got other things to sort out, then you sort them out and you can come back to him, I guess. But yeah, I mean, playing key position, you can't really be expecting him to score big numbers. I mean, maybe in Supercoach, but not necessarily in fantasy. Zaro 46, Drury 38. So you'd expect those rookies to still score around those prices, and you're probably looking at just trading them out when they max out as soon as possible. Tom Powell was obviously the big disappointment with the 34, and that's just not his fault. I mean, yeah, he probably could have done a little bit more. He's known for his tackling, and he only had one tackle, so he could have done more. But he was playing half forward. He wasn't playing his usual midfield role. We're all really hoping that we probably want to trade him out. And that's understandable, because if he's going to play half forward, then he's no use. But we're hoping that this week Clarko comes to his senses and puts him back into the midfield, because I think he started with Phillips used Phillips in the midfield. Let's just have a look at these CBAs for this game. So, you had LDU as usual. He's 82% CBAs. Wardlaw 71. So Simpkin's been playing half forward, and he brought Simpkin into the midfield, 54%. Phillips 37%. Powell 14%. And I think that was pretty much when Phillips got subbed. So hopefully Clarko looks at it this week and thinks, well, I'm going to drop Phillips or play him on the bench and move Powell back into the midfield, Simpkin at a half forward, because Simpkin was horrible. So let's hope. We just have to hope that that's what Clarko does, because likely I'll be holding Powell. But one of my potential trades is probably trading out Jackson, because he's no good. Now that Darcy's in the team, he just has to absolutely go. So making some decisions on what I do there with Jackson. But moving on with Adelaide. Zach Fisher. So we all got the early news thanks to I've forgotten his name. What's that news reporter? Doesn't matter. You know who I'm talking about. I've forgotten his name. But he sort of tweeted out that Zach Fisher was going to be the sub. So the moment that we knew that, if you owned Zach Fisher, likely you would have traded him out. But let's see if there are still... Cleary. That's it, Cleary. He was the journo. Sorry. And Zach Fisher, so 21% owned. So there's still a few that kept him. Probably it might have had some other things to sort out, or maybe you didn't hear that he was going to be the sub. And he ended up scoring a 34. It was in 37% game time, so that was pretty good. But that I don't think that's I don't think he's going to continue as that sub. I reckon they'll bring him back into the team. They traded him in for a reason. He lost 35k, so that does hurt. But his break-even's 106. He'll drop a little bit more, but he hasn't been a big scorer anyway. I would be looking at trading him out anyway. And the other player, I just missed out on, was Dersma, and there might be a few that might still own him. Yeah, so 41% owned, and you'd be holding him. His break-even's 54. He scored a 51, and he did drop 11k. But yeah, look, he's one you could probably move off on. He's only made 90k overall. He's probably been a bit of a disappointing pick, to be honest. If you've got some other things obviously to worry about in your team, then you're focusing on them. But yeah, you can definitely move Dersma out of your team for sure. But with Adelaide, it's good to see Dawson back, playing that role, getting a heap of ball. It was against North Melbourne, mind you. So he went up 15k. He scored a 122. That's what I love to see. 27 possessions, but 24 were kicks and 9 marks. And kicked a goal. That's the Jordan Dawson that we want to see. So that's awesome. After that 60 that he scored in round 5, a 155 and a 122 in his last 2 games. So he is an uber premium, 109 average. And yeah, if you own him, then yeah, you're holding him for the year, obviously. But if you don't, yeah, 966k is what he's worth. It's just way too much. Can't really get him in. And you'd be looking at more underpriced premiums for sure. Rory Laird, a 121, so he came back with a bang and got a 121, scores of 75 and 83 in his last 2 games. So he was at was underpriced last week and is absolute value right now because he lost 9k even though he got that 121. His break even's 111. In my opinion, I think he is one of the biggest value premiums to be bringing in this week. He's only 884k. Break even of 111. If you really want him, you bring him in this week, but you could potentially bring him in next week. You never know. He may not get that 111. When we look at, let's see, Adelaide has got Port. So the showdown Thursday night. You'd expect Laird to perform in that kind of a big game like that. He only had 57% CBAs. So a lot lower than usual because they're playing Saligo through there. Crouch came back into the team. So you had Crouch at 71%, Saligo 62, Dawson 60, and Laird 57. So it's good to see that even though he got 57% CBAs, that he actually ended up scoring quite well. But again, as I said, it was against North Melbourne. So let's see how he goes this week. But you could bring him in this week as an underpriced premium, but I think also maybe waiting till next week. And I think he's still also an option. At worst, he'll go up, a few dollars, but at under 900k, that is value for Laird. So there's some, I just want to see Saligo because I know he's playing midfield. Some might have brought him in. He's okay, so he's not owned by many. And yeah, I think there's other better players to go for there. And then so Matt Crouch came back in with an 82. I wonder how many held onto Crouch. How much is he owned by? So he's owned by 12% of teams still. So there were a few that held on to him. 82, a little bit disappointing considering he spent all that time in the midfield. But he ended up, and it's as usual with Matt Crouch. So 26 possessions, 24 possessions, but 18 were handballs. And that's just the way it's going to be with him. 6 tackles as well, which is actually really great to see. But only an 82. Had 3 free kicks against him as well. But he's 835, break even of 114. You could potentially upgrade him if you don't have anything else worth doing at this stage. Or wait another week and see if his price drops and bring him in. But yeah, I think if you own him, you probably have other things to worry about in your team. So you could still hold on to him. He's got the role. So, and then for the rest of Adelaide, there's probably no one else of interest for me there. And then with Geelong and Carlton, Cam Guthrie came back and scored a 104. There were a few that were going to start him as an underpriced premium. So he went up 11k, break even of 82. He's predominantly playing in that midfield. If we have a look at the CBAs for Geelong, he didn't actually spend a lot of time with the CBAs, only 10%. But because Geelong's really spreading their midfield as far as the CBAs go. If you have a look at the CBAs, so Parfitt was 62%, Broon 59%, Dangerfield 37, Bowes 35, O'Connor 35, Atkins 32, Blitzarves 32, and then Guthrie 10. So that's what Geelong's doing. They're not really getting, they're rotating their CBAs, but there are a few that are playing through the midfield. But the good thing with Cam Guthrie is that he a little bit in the midfield, but he was actually getting a fair bit of ball at half back. That was great to see. So he ended up with 27 possessions. He had 7 marks, which was great, and 3 kicks, 4, which is handy as well, and scored the 104. So, if you can only afford a player that's around that 7 to 800k, could be worth a look, along with, I think, Caldwell is one to have a look at around that price. Max Holmes with a 96, that'll be him, I think, for the year, around that 90 to 100 mark. To be honest, no one else of real interest for me. Looking through that team. Oliver Dempsey. So yeah, the thing with Dempsey, so Dempsey started really well and then just did nothing for 3 quarters. I'll spend a bit of time on the bench too, but still in 73% game time, he got 50 points, 13 possessions, 4 marks. But he's got the job security. You wouldn't expect that he'd be a sub or tagged or anything like that. He actually looks really good. Like he's playing really well on that wing. So he's got the role there. But with a break even now of 76, you're probably looking at trading him, I think. Last few scores of 54 and 50 is not great. If he can get one big score, that would be really great. But I think Dempsey's, it's time to go. 76 break even. He's made 295k overall, which is just great for his owners, and only went down by 4k this last week. But yeah, I reckon he could go now. If you want to downgrade or upgrade Dempsey. Then moving on to Carlton, so they had a big game against Geelong, even though they lost the game. There was 6 players turned up. Then of course included Sam Walsh, so he's now gone up. So there's a fair few that jumped on him, 20% owned, but he's gone up to 926k now. And he's averaging 116, but that's predominantly because of that 145 he got in his first game. Look, I think he's a premium to hold for the year. I'm hoping to anyway. But I just want to really see him get back to more of a 110 average, hopefully. He had 31 possessions, but again, 18 were handballs. Again, no marks. He's just not getting any marks. But 7 tackles, which is good. So the other stats are really good. It'd be nice if you can get more kicks and more handballs. Sorry, more kicks than handballs and more marks. So Zach Williams, he ended up getting a 60. I think a few traded him out anyway this week. It's definitely time to trade him because he went down 9k this week. He's break even 75 and he's averaging 64. When the average is under your break even for a player like a rookie, then yeah, it's probably time to move them on. And if you've got Williams, I would say definitely move them on. 22% owned, so I'd be looking at trading, definitely. So that's probably it for Carlton. And then moving on to the Freo Bulldogs game, there's a fair few to talk about in this game. So Nat Fyfe came through, massive 118 score. It was just awesome to watch. He had 37 possessions, 25 were handballs though. 4 tackles. He had a great game and he's looking really good. And considering that we're pretty much starved of value and of premiums in the forward line, it's great to have Fyfe in there still. So with that big score, he went up 47k. He's gone up 142k overall. He's 633k now. Has a break even of 37. So and he's averaging 78. So we now, for a while there, we were a little bit worried, like, oh, maybe we should trade him out, and would have been fair if you did trade him out. He had scored 63, 61, 78, 62, so he was getting around that average. But last 2 weeks, 82, 118, and it's just great for obviously for us to have kept him and held him. That's really worked out well. Caleb Sarong, a 107, 37 possessions, but 27 were handballs, and that's where he lost points. He really could have scored big. Hayden Young, he had 24 possessions, 15 were kicks, and that's the way it is with Young. He does kick a lot more than he handballs. And for him, 4 marks, 5 tackles, and a goal. So that's a really good performance. He's going to be a premium defender. Will likely finish in that top 6. He's the first couple of games, but his last few games, 129, 108, 102, and 88 last week, and now 100. So he's averaging 99, and he's certainly a keeper, and he's got the good buy round, the round 13 buy. So pretty happy with him. So Sean Darcy's come back, scored a 95. We've got our other rucks that we'd be prioritising over Sean Darcy. Jordan Clark, a 93, continues his 90s average, but 23 possessions, 16 kicks, 11 marks. If you own him, it's pretty good. He's averaging in the 90s. You got other things to probably be more concerned about than Jordan Clark if he's in your team. Andrew Brayshaw, an 87. So this is what's just happening with Brayshaw. He's just getting a bit up and down scores. He's only tonned up twice. So if you own him, there's a 5% that own him. You're holding and just hoping that he can ton up. But yeah, I wouldn't be looking at bringing him in. So Luke Jackson is the big disappointment. So he's scored a 61. So if we have a look at the start of his season, a 96, a 108, 88, 94, doing really well without Darcy in the team. Really happy. But then the last couple of weeks, a 61 with Darcy in the team. He's playing mostly up forward, a little bit of ruck. I think he's just going to continue to average around that 60 to 70 mark. He may get the occasional ton, but I think at 7.31, he's still got price and value, and I think that it's probably time for him to go, if not already. We really need to get rid of him. So Heath Chapman came in, I think, for his first game and scored a 58. It's not too bad. A few of us were going to start him. And Patrick Voss. So we had Voss come in and score a 47, and he looked all right. He was playing predominantly up forward. Sorry about that. So he was looking predominantly up forward. He was playing and scored that 47. Will he hold his spot? Not really too sure, but he went up 17k has a break even of 8. So if you need a rookie, if he's named, then yeah, you could bring him in. Jeremy Sharp is the big disappointment. 39. He has got to go now. Break even of 76, unless he gets some big massive game. Massive score, like what Fife has done. But I think you could definitely trade him out now. But again, if you have other urgent things to do, can't do Sharp, you can obviously just wait till next week. He has the potential of getting a 70. We had Cooper Simpson come in and score a 28, but he was the sub. His job security is an issue. He looks really good, though. Got to watch this game, and he looked great. Just the way he moves and plays. Only went up 3k, 203k, break even of 21. If he starts the game and he's not a sub, then he could be a potential option. And then Draper was injured. I don't know if you picked him up as a rook, but he's obviously got to go as well. So Tim English, a 141, and he is now back out to 943k. He had those scores of 98, 93, and 68, and probably last week was the time to have brought him in. He still lost 128k overall, but he went up 18k this last week. And if you're wanting a premium ruck, yeah, sure, you can bring in English, break even of 94. Not much to say with him. Bailey Dale's the surprise, a 134. Didn't expect him to actually score so well. So his last few games now, 160 and a 134, just playing off half back there. Like 30 possessions, 23 kicks. Would you bring him in at 759k? He's another one of those ones around that 7 to 800k. Last 2 games, if he keeps playing the way he's playing, though, then yeah, why wouldn't you? But yeah, I'm not. In fact, the next player I'm going to talk about is who I am bringing in. So Bont got a 96. He had 27 possessions, 16 handballs, that was. 5 marks, 4 tackles. Yeah, not really a great game for owners. But he is now, where is he? See, he's 921k. He's dropped 135k overall, dropped 98k this week. You could wait, obviously, because his break-even's 128. You don't have to bring him in this week. But against Hawthorn and against Richmond in his next 2 games, I'm expecting him to get some pretty decent scores. He's 56% owned. A lot of the comp has him, and I really want to have him in my team. So he will probably be the one that I will be bringing in this week. And Sam Darcy would have been great if you jumped on him. Obviously, many jumped on him in Supercoach, but in fantasy, so a 194. And he's actually made 193k overall. We wouldn't have thought to have brought him in, considering that he was priced in the 400s, but to start with. But only 2% owned, but good on you. Those 2% that own him. Trelaw 83, a bit down on what he's been averaging. And where else are we looking? Who have I missed? Oh, McRae, sorry. So McRae got a 90, and I think that's what you're kind of hoping for if he's averaging in the 90s. That's just, with his role, you take that. It's not like the old days of McRae playing in the midfield where, you wouldn't take anything less than 100 average. But, you're probably happy now with him. If you brought him in last week, then you're probably happy with the 90. He's gone up 15k this last week. He's dropped 99k overall, break even of 68. But if we have a look at the CBAs as well for this game, he only got 30% CBAs. Of course, it's usually Trelaw and Bont. But the interesting thing is, obviously, because Libba wasn't there, Richards kind of took his role. You think that they would have brought McRae in and spent more time with McRae, but obviously Bevo is seeing McRae differently now. I think that's the end of him as far as CBAs and midfield time goes, because Ed Richards came in and had 92% CBAs. But if we have a look at Ed Richards' score, he only scored a 76. So you kind of were hoping that he would have scored more. If that was McRae in the midfield, you'd expect McRae to have at least gotten a 110. But yeah, you're just happy with a 90. And considering that we don't have many forwards who are scoring well, McRae is an underpriced option. And so moving through with the doggies. So where are we? So Harvey Gallagher. So there's a few of us that own Harvey Gallagher, 17% owned. He lost 5k this week. His break even is 61. He's made 222k, so I'm pretty happy with that. But yeah, score of 32, really disappointing. But he's a rookie. What are you going to do? He's gonna have these scores from time to time. You just hope that he keeps his job security, his role in the team, and puts out a decent score at some point to keep his cash flow moving on. But look, normally I would be trading him out, but I've got some other things to sort out before looking at trading him. And then the Gold Coast and West Coast game. Sorry, guys, I know we've gone for an hour and 20 here. It's a fair bit to get through. So Raul, 122, great score from him, continues to score well. Flanders, a 112, again, usual stuff with these guys. Noah Anderson, a 111. Tuke Miller, a 109. It's not bad, but they were playing against West Coast, that's the thing. So you kind of expect players to be scoring well against West Coast, especially midfielders. But Will Graham, that's what we're looking at, is the rookies. So Will Graham, an 83, that's really helped his scoring. So he went up 64k this week. He's already made 226k. His break even is 7, so he's going to be a great cash cow for us. Jake Rogers is the interesting one. So he came in and scored a 22 in his first week. I think he was the sub. And then this time he scored a 69. And so he's went up 25k this week. Break even is 11, 280k. Looks like they are going to keep him. He's doing a pretty good job there, playing in that forward line, rotating through the forward line. Then we got Sam Clohessy, 59. He's got the potential to just put out big scores as well. Only 59. It's his lowest score for the year so far, but he still went up 56k, break even of 19. He's made 278k already. So fantastic cash cow for us, averaging 80. And he's definitely got that wing roll now to himself. And it's probably about it for the Gold Coast. For West Coast, Yo, an 82, massive discrepancy between his fantasy and Supercoach scores. But 19 possessions, 10 were handballs, no marks, but he had 8 tackles and he kicked a goal. And so that's what probably helped him with his Supercoach scores. But their fantasy, only an 82, was hoping for better than that. But I think I'm just really happy to have him in my team. I'm not going to even bother with him because he's going to put up the occasional ton. He'll average around the 90s, so I can hold him there if till later on. 45% own him. Another player in the 700s at 750 to 800, and he's a good player for me to have in my defense for now. And then going through the West Coast team, there's probably really no one else of interest. He had Dom Sheed come in as a sub, got a 30, so let's see how well he goes over the next few weeks. And then lastly, the Hawthorn and Sydney game. And there's probably a couple of things just to talk about in this game. So Sicily with an 84, definitely wouldn't be thinking of bringing him in. And then Will Day came in and scored a 47. So Will Day might be one of those ones where he might need a few weeks just to get a feel for the game, get his match fitness up, and in the meantime he'll put out low scores, drop in price, and then maybe he might be one to bring in at a later date. And we have a look at the CBAs. Actually, even with Gold Coast, the CBAs, Graham had 39% CBAs. It's really good to see that he's getting a bit of midfield time in there. Before Hawthorn, where are we? So they had 50% CBAs, and that'll increase over time. And then we can maybe consider him at a later date, potentially. So they're moving on just lastly with Sydney. And so we had Errol Goulden, a 120. I guess midfielders and actually a lot of players are going to score well against Sydney, but Heaney a 90. We're hoping for a bit more than that. So he's 954k, went down 8k in this match. 125 break even, but yeah, he's averaging 114. So he's probably going to be one of these ones that you need to have in your forward line. But you got Luke Parker coming back this week. Let's see how Heaney goes with Luke Parker, not just in this game, but probably the following game, because Luke Parker's coming back off an injury. He'll likely play a bit more time up forward. So let's see how he goes the following game when he probably gets a bit more mid-time and how that impacts Heaney. Roberts just continues to put up these good scores. So another 80 from him, that's an 82 from him. He went up 33k. He's made 386k to be, the rookie of the year, and his break even is 55. So we just hold on to him. But unless you're going to be aggressive, you want to make a big trade now, you could upgrade, of course, to a premium from him now if you needed to be. But we can hold on to him for a few more weeks just to squeeze out a bit more cash from him. And Grundy, a 72, and a pretty disappointing score from him, especially after last week with a 142. And maybe that's just going to be the way with Grundy. He's going to score well one week, drop another week, and that actually, if we have a look at his scores, he's been doing that all year, just up and down. So yeah, again, not a player that you're going to be bringing in, but yeah, sure, you probably would hold and fix up other things in your team. James Jordan, for anyone that held, 71, that's pretty much him. He's going to average in the 70s. Taylor Adams, I don't know if anyone considered him, but only a 63, and so you wouldn't be considering him at all at this stage. So that is all the games. If we have a very quick look at break evens and see where the lowest break evens are. So again, ones like Darcy Jones, Biggie Newen, Woden. These are the players that we would be considering because of their price. Maybe not Biggie, but Darcy Jones, if he keeps his job security going there, and Woden is certainly an option if he can stay in the best 22. And of course Voss as well. So Voss is 8 break even as well. So not a lot of option there as far as break evens. Daniel Turner was an interesting one, but 356k, 9 break even. We want to be looking at players who are a bit cheaper for our rooks with the low break evens. But then for the expensive break evens, obviously Dom Sheed at that low score. We'll see, as I said, how far he can drop down in price. Rowan Marshall, a 158. If you've got him, he's a keeper, obviously, but he could be one that you might want to wait to bottom out and bring in. Jack Steele, again, he's another one because last few weeks have not been great, but 151 break even. If you don't own him, wait till he bottoms out and bring him in. Tom Stewart's another one. Connor Rozee when he comes back. Clayton Oliver when he picks up form. Christian Petrarca when he picks up form will be great at his price. So we've got a few there with high break evens to kind of look at. So some interesting options for this week. Now if I go to my team and what I plan on doing for this week, so I've got a few different options. I have to have McKercher on the ground now, so I'll bring him on. I'll keep Wilson there. Obviously, Harley Reid I have to have on the ground as well. So Harley Reid I'll probably bring on for Dempsey. So I've got a few different options as far as my trades go. So one option was trading Marshall to Sweet and then Sharp to Bont. That, of course, is an option. I could trade Jackson out to Sweet, bring Barnett into my forward line, and then bring Dempsey back on the ground, have Barnett on my bench. So that's an option as well. And then Sweet will be on my bench making money, and he'll be an emergency there for me for my rucks. Tom Powell, look, I know there'll be some wanting to trade him out. I might just hold him and just hope that he goes back to his original role in the midfield. So I'll keep an eye on him. I know he'll probably lose cash this week, break even of 118, but when he's playing in the midfield, he's getting 90s. So I just want to see one more week to see if he ends up playing, goes back to the midfield again. But I would say I'm looking at players like Dempsey, Jackson, even Marshall, and Sharp as players I'm planning on trading for this week. And I'm bringing in Bont. I definitely want to bring in Bont this week for the games he's got coming up. Look, technically I could wait till next week, that break even of 128 or so. But I want to bring him in this week. Laird, of course, is the other one. That's a really good underpriced premium to bring in. There's a few underpriced premiums I think that are worth bringing in. Just having a look at in that 800k mark. So you got Kelly at 897, even Rowell 878. It's pretty good. Zorko dropped a little bit, but I might wait till he bottoms out. But Laird's probably the one. Miller had a good score this week, but again, it's against West Coast. But I think Laird's probably that one that's maybe worth looking at for this week. Petrarca, not for this week, but I think for next week will be one to also look at. Stewart in a couple of weeks when he bottoms out as well. But Laird but for me, Bont is the one I'm looking at. And then maybe, look, I guess the other option is I could bring in Laird this week and Bont next week. That's always an option. But that's kind of what I'm looking at. As far as captains for this week, so if we've got Butters or even Laird or Dawson, you could VC them on the Thursday. Walsh or Dacos, again, the Carlton-Collingwood game on Friday, we could VC them. But then we've got the Sydney GWS game as well. This is obviously looks like it's a bit of some traditional rivals playing against each other. You know, Brisbane Gold Coast, Adelaide, Port Adelaide, Carlton Collingwood, Sydney GWS. So there's a few games there. Melbourne Geelong, West Coast Freo would have been good this week, but yeah, anyway. So a few games there, some local clashes. But I think moving on, yeah. So if Steele can do well against North. So the big one for me, of course, is Gawn again. Now, Gawn will be rucking against probably Stanley or even Blitzarves, or they might bring in Conway. But against Geelong and at the MCG, you'd expect Gawn to go huge and go big. So seeing as West Coast plays just after, actually at the same time as Melbourne, you couldn't really, because most of us have a Barnett or a Livingston or someone like that. We're normally using our West Coast loopholes for our captaincy, so you can't really VC, say, Gawn, and then go into like a Bont against Hawthorn, for example. Actually, I would have liked to have done that. But yeah, for me, I think I will likely go Sheasel probably in that St Kilda game, because there are a lot of teams scoring big against St Kilda, and he is averaging 127 or 125. But I'll be wanting like a over 130 for Sheasel, I think, because I think Gawn against Geelong is going to be monstrous. He'll go over 130 again. So I'll be going to him as far as the VC and C goes. So there's a fair bit that we had to cover for this week. Hopefully you guys again have another good week this week. We want to really jump on some of these underpriced premiums when we see them. We're starting to now see some of our rookies maxing out, and they're all kind of maxing out at the same time. So we don't want to lose too much cash. Some other players too. Remember, we want to just see how their role goes again in the following week before just moving and jumping off them or jumping on them. A few things to consider. But guys, hope you all have a really good week this week. Hope you had a good fantasy weekend and a good one coming up. And I'll see you guys at the end of round 8. See ya.